service. Has brass and timpani. And there are members of the congregation who haven't been in church in their lives who are attending. I think that is spectacular. I think it is spectacular. Terry?
Yep.
What I want to talk about is Keller's section, which is about 5 chapters, called The Gospel and Contextualization. What he means by contextualization is he uses a bridge metaphor. So if you imagine these as rocky or grassy areas, and this is water, and then there's a bridge that has to be built. What he says is you may know the gospel here, and you want to take it to the people who live here. But to do it, you have to translate the gospel into language these people will understand. The fact that you get it doesn't mean you can hand it off to these people and they're going to get it, unless you learn how to speak their language. So what I was imagining is all of us somewhere had somebody translate the gospel into something we could understand, and now we're going to have to do the same thing for somebody else. So it's making sure that we take the time to translate the gospel without corrupting it. So you don't want to make the gospel, in an attempt to attract a whole lot of people, make it not what it actually is, so that you can get a crowd. You also don't want to say, do it my way or the highway. So you're not actually offering the gospel, but something that looks just like you. One of the great things about doing what you're doing is you are forced to come up with what is at the core of the gospel so that you can do this work of translation. To know that you can't take for granted that what you take as essential, somebody else will take as essential. You're going to have to know what it is you think. Ready?
Yep. Yeah.
I get a clicker?
You get a clicker, you point it at the laptop, and you press the little button when it gets it. Not at the screen, but at the laptop.
I think I figured that out.
See, I always do it backwards, so. You're smarter than me.
This is a quote from Keller. All are made in God's image, therefore God, the Holy Spirit, gives people outside the church and in the larger culture a measure of wisdom, courage, insight, and goodness. There is an aspect of God's grace that is common and available to all people everywhere. You get that? In Methodism, it's called prevenient grace. That is the grace that is there before you say yes to God. God's yes to you changes your life in ways you don't know. So it isn't dependent upon the church or upon faith. It is called prevenient grace, or what he calls a common grace. To be human is to be made in the image of God, to have the gift of natural law. The working of God is already in the world, whether you see it or not. So that when we meet people, they may be better at part of God's grace than we are, and say they don't believe in God at all. They may be better at justice, or working with the poor, or intellectual awareness. So God's grace is in all people, called common grace or prevenient grace, and natural law is one of the expressions of that grace. The process of applying a biblical perspective to affirm and confront the assumptions, questions, and values in a given culture. So we should be shaped by what God wants of us in such a way that when we confront a culture that's different than ours, we can evaluate what it's doing that's right and what it's doing that's wrong. So we can say yes and no to different things. Using the Bible to affirm people's values and deepest desires, answer their specific questions, and confront their particular idols. That's how Keller describes applying biblical perspective to the people we're going to meet.
You really mean right and wrong?
Keller would, yes.
Do we have to?
Yes.
Yeah,
Glad you asked.
thank you for the answer.
For Jews, this is a quote from Paul. For Jews demand signs and Greeks desire wisdom. So you get how he's getting the culture of the Jews and the culture of the Greeks, that Jews are wanting to see power and signs. The Greek are in the wisdom traditions. That's how their cultures are organized. but we proclaim Christ crucified, stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. In other words, he understands that what he's offering the Jews don't want and the Greeks don't want. And so those are things he's not willing to compromise, and he knows where the stumbling blocks are going to be. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, power is about a sign. Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. This is an example of Paul's contextualizing the scripture, confronting the cultural idols of Corinth, wisdom and philosophy, while affirming them too. That is, Paul is equating wisdom with Christ and is making a philosophical argument. That is, when he is talking about the gospel, he's using philosophical language. You get that? So you can talk about the gospel, he could have referred back to Old Testament images, but where is he? He's in Corinth, which is a Roman city. So he's using the language of Corinth, which is philosophical language. So he's making the gospel make sense to the people who live there.
Who are the called? Who are the called? Who is Paul talking about?
Whoever responds.
Okay.
That's how, for the people who enter the church, who respond to the gospel, they're the called. So there's a sense for Paul in which we'll be the best we can at inviting people, but if anybody responds, it's in spite of us, not because of us. Persuading people of the gospel through. So here are ways to pay attention to people. Fear of judgment and death, a desire for release from burdens of guilt or shame, appreciation for the attractiveness of truth, appealing to their unfulfilled existential longings, promising to help them with a problem, offering the chance to be loved. In other words, if the church were to craft a message that people want to hear, these are universal human longings that people will say yes to. People want to know that if they go to church, they're going to be loved. They're going to, if you can find out, if you can do sermons and songs that talk about the release from guilt or shame, there's going to be a crowd that wants to hear that. And that's true for all of these, according to Keller. Entering and adapting to a culture. The idea is every church has its own culture. Understand the culture of our own church and community. That is, what is it we take for granted as true? Let's begin to sketch how planting a community's culture may differ from how the planting community's culture may differ from our own. That is, are there values we have that where we're going they don't have? And so how do we not clothe the gospel in what makes us happy, but find out what they need so they can hear it in their own language? Discern what the community's A beliefs are and what their B beliefs are. A beliefs. Those are the things where that culture and our culture are identical. That if we do it our way, we're a perfect match for where we're going. B is where we're not a match. And so it's being honest about what those things are. In other words, let's say we go to a community of people who've never been to church in their lives, and what they want to do with their lives is they want to serve the poor. So when you talk about the gospel, you talk about how it tells us to serve the poor. And they began to find in the gospel an expression of what they already want to do with their lives. There'll be other things, belief of the community's culture, that makes the gospel a tough sell. That's like the stumbling block to the Jews. What is it the community holds as sacred that we don't think is that big a deal? So questions to ask. As you hear tonight about the culture we might be going to, here are some questions I'd like you to be thinking about. And after we hear the presentation, I'm going to ask us to answer. What's the culture's highest value? If we can't answer it, then what do we need to ask so we can? What's their deepest desire? What's their deepest fear? What questions do they ask? What do they need help with? What makes church a stumbling block for them? That is, what presuppositions do they have that tells them they would never be called dead in a church? So how do we have to position ourselves so they'll even give us a hearing? Why are they not religiously engaged now?
How would we answer these questions?
My guess is we'll begin finding the shape of what the questions are. And then in the fall, when we start engaging the community, we begin asking them. According to our database, we have over 500 members who now live in the area we want to serve. Is that about right, Terry?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll have some people we can call upon to help us answer those questions and to invite their neighbors to come to what will be some of our first events. That's it. I want to hand out for you a kind of a mission statement idea. Pass this around. They gave me more stuff. That's all you need. You could have made it.
Oh, we just.
They've got about it. Sorry. You get more there when I was this up? Get more this way. Thank you. This is one of the documents we put in the package you got when we started this process. So you may have read it already, but it also may have been buried in what we were doing and you didn't see it. Our starting mission, to plant a vital congregation in the Fort Belvoir region with the following attributes. Not a church people's church. We will engage nominal Christians and the religiously unaffiliated through missional communities and creative gospel-centered worship. A church not for ourselves. We will challenge people to meet the needs in their community through works of mercy, engagement with the culture, and church planting. Our vision is to be a Wesleyan movement of people where doubt is welcomed, faith is grown, lives are changed, and communities are transformed. Our values, the gospel, changed people, and our community. Aldersgate Satellite Congregational Feasibility Report. You can read more of the stuff that goes over. But I wanted you to get the mission and the vision and the values piece as we start doing our work. We'll return to that a bunch of times. You ready to hear a report? First, are there any questions about the contextualization idea? The idea of having to understand the gospel well and translate it so somebody else understands it, and then translate it so somebody else gets. You have to get to the core of what it is that are our values. What are the things that we won't let go of and the things we will?
I mean, the one slide that says, you know, why people come to faith.
Right.
In my estimation, that has changed considerably. And getting from population to population.
Right.
And so, you know, I think we have to find out what are the key one of those 8 or 9, whatever they were, that will appeal to the population.
That's the question. Exactly right. We can't take for granted we know what that is. What causes them to say yes? What's their yes button? Finding out how to pay attention to it.
I think the other thing is the important message of kind of the basic communication models. You've got people transmitting, receiving. You can't broadcast your message on your favorite channel that you've always done. You've got to broadcast on their channel because that's the only thing they can receive on. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get the message across. And that people are going to be changing all the time. If we did this 2 years from now in a only slightly different area, we have lessons learned, but we'd be going back through this process.
Part of it, we'd have to start all over.
We'd have to start all over.
Are we limiting ourselves for the not a church people's church?
Yes. That's what Jason and I are proposing in that. That's our target. That doesn't mean that's who's going to show up.
Because I think, I mean, you know, it's not any sort of scientific study here, but in the Fort Belvoir area where you've got, well, not a majority, but a large preponderance of military members, there will be a lot that have gone to church before. They are a church people, they know of church, but they may not be going to church now because they're so transient. And I think, and even that's an example, but I mean, personally, I think that we're trying to preach the gospel and see to the community's needs. And if we say in our mission that we're trying to build not a church people's church, then we may be excluding other people that also need to see the gospel and the need of the church. And maybe that's just to saying that this is our priority, and maybe I'm putting the wrong semantics on here, but
It's good for non-church people, isn't it good for church people?
I've referred to Willow Creek Community Church in the past. It's in the suburb of Chicago. It has about 25,000 on the weekend. So when I went to the workshop on how they started the church and talked to their staff, this won't appeal to everybody. And I'm offering it because I find it interesting. And if it offends you, I didn't really say it. But they heard from a lot of women that if they could create a church their husbands liked and wanted to go to, they would be happy. So in Willow Creek's beginning, they targeted about a 35-year-old male. What would make a 35-year-old male go to church? I'm not saying it's the best, but if you go to that church, it's not filled with only 35-year-old males. There are a lot of women. Seriously? No, it's got you got 25,000 people. You realize you've got everybody. So I think our idea is that the growing part of the population are people who aren't interested in church, and so we have to be good at that. And if we're good at that, we also will attract church people. That's the rationale.
You're not excluding anybody, but you're targeting a particular group, knowing that that's the center, but there's going to be rings of others you'll be bringing in, and one of them are church people.
Right. Like I think Jason and I talked today, and we said if we did big Bob hillbilly people coming to play bluegrass music stuff, we did that every week, I bet I could have 300 people somewhere in Belvoir show up for that service. I just think if I did that, I'd get 1 million people show up.
But the list of questions,
Yes.
people are not looking for church, they're looking for meaning. And we're not selling church,
Correct.
we're selling meaning.
Right.
Church is a vehicle by which meaning, truth, some of those other things is delivered.
Exactly.
So we're not in the business of selling church.
Right. And for a lot of people, church is a negative. I mean, just once they hear that you're doing the church thing,
Right.
that tells them not to come. Because their experiences are that it isn't a match for them. They've been to church before, and it doesn't match what they want to get out of their lives. And almost no one from my kids are 32 and 29, feel guilty about not being in church for even a second. It just isn't. It's like feeling guilty for not doing taekwondo. It just doesn't. I think it's a fine thing to do, and if you want to do it, they think it's fine. They're not opposed to it. Most don't feel guilty about not being. So we're not selling churches. We're selling meaning. Okay. So, Cory, you up? Tell us what you were doing and what you learned. And you guys may want to take notes. I'm assuming what Cory has to tell us will be applicable to every group that's here. That what he's been doing is stuff we all want to know about.
Okay, so we were the neighborhood group, which was fortunate that Jason gave me this group because this is really the kind of stuff I know how to do. If it was a creative part, then I would fail miserably. And I was very fortunate that the people that volunteered to do this with me are all equally minded and do great research and are able to package data together so that made this much easier. we had two steps in our process. One is we needed to figure out what the churches were like in the area, so we get a lay of the land. And these sub-bullets kind of talk about how we did that. So we established things we could grade, we found out what churches were there, collected all the data that defined them, and then we graded them, and I use heat as an example of how we gave them their grades. And then we plotted them on a map. I'll show you examples of that. And then we tried to characterize the people that live in those areas. And there's all kinds of statistical data that we got from, or that I got from the census websites and places like that. Really though, you can paint a pretty good statistical picture of what the people are like, but it has nothing to do with all those questions that we saw before. That's why I asked, how do we answer those? Because all the data I collected, that's not going to answer those questions, and really those are the important ones. So, you know, I'll show you what we've got, but it really only kind of puts a skeleton of what the people are like, which really isn't that important. And then we're in the only thing that we haven't done now is develop these neighborhood profiles, and for the areas that we chose from the step one. So that's the next thing, and I've got an example of how we've done that. Jason gave me this process form. It was basically a thesis that was done that looked specifically at the Belvoir area, and he said, I want you to do a similar thing for neighborhoods all the way down to Quantico. And so that's the scope of our project. We're producing something that looks like he gave me as an example for neighborhoods all the way down. So even though Dennis keeps saying in the Belvoir area, we had a lot wider scope. Okay. So the first thing we did was we developed things to grade these churches by. We came up with this list. You can see the ones that were scratched out at the bottom. Got rid of them for a variety of different reasons. And so for the top 9, these are the areas that we said are the things that we can measure that we, our group, believed are the most important things to help break out the heat of a church.
Are they prioritized?
You'll see that. What a great lead. Everybody good on that? Next. So then, once you have, here are the things that are important, we weight them. Just like you take a college class, and college classes have different numbers of credits based on how important it is for your major. The same idea, right? And so, yes, they were in order of priority, and here are the weights for them. So the metric weight basically gives you an idea of how important that characteristic is for any church.
And that's assigned by your group as
Yep.
in terms of importance, so your perception of importance.
That's exactly right. Everything you're going to see up here is our opinion.
Why did you rate website quality so high?
Anybody want to try to tackle that? Me personally, I didn't have website that high, but hundreds of the group believe that it showed. Keep in mind that what we're trying to do, when you show the heat of the church, the strength of the church, it is how well is it doing in drawing people into it. So your website, from what we had seen, was the primary mechanism for how they communicated to their area.
It's basically getting to the point, the idea of, is this church able to communicate in the modern age and the modern world? You look at some of the websites, and some are very clearly directed at when you go in being informed of exactly what's going on and what to do. And for instance, Aldersgate, I am unable to find the address of Aldersgate on the Aldersgate website. Yeah, just
For example.
because, but it goes back to what Dennis was saying. If you're a church for yourself, everybody in Aldersgate knows where the church is.
And even though I didn't put as much emphasis on the website, there is an uncanny correlation between sophistication of the website and the size of the church. Lots of little dying churches in the area that either don't have websites, or you go to it and it's one page and it shows a picture of a church, their address, and please come to church here.
But is that a cause or a result? In other words, if you've got a large group of people and a pretty good-sized budget, you can afford to do a lot of things that you can't if you have 50 people showing up on Sunday.
But there's lots of 15-year-old kids that make awesome websites in their basement.
Well, and really what we're trying to measure here is, what we're trying to determine is not those deeper questions, right? It's how powerful that church is.
Right.
Yeah, and I might not agree also with that being an 8 today, but it's becoming a bigger number as we go ahead, because more people are using websites.
So anyway, I don't want to spend all day because, like I said, opinions are like noses, right? So everybody's going to say, why did you make that 4? Okay, next. So there are 135 churches between the edge of 22308, basically, and up as far as like Kingstown, and then you come out as far out here as like the Burke Lake area, and then all the way down to Quantico, not going crazy far west out here. We broke it out by zip codes, and you'll see what those zip codes are here in a minute. The little pins are the church, or where different churches are located. And so we researched all these 135 churches. Went to websites, that's where a lot of the information comes from. But like I said, there's a wide variety and quality of websites. And so we direct contacted a sizable number of these places. Still a wide variety of responses. I contacted, this is a very interesting story, I contacted one church, a Methodist church, by the way, and I had a bunch of questions, sent them an email, and said, I'm interested in learning more about your church. I didn't say that I went to Aldersgate and we're doing, finding out if we can move into your neighborhood. I did not lie to them, but by reading it, it appeared as though, oh, this is a person who's new to the neighborhood and wants to know, if they want to go to church here. The response I got from them was, why are you asking these questions? What are you up to? I was like, no wonder you're a dying church. So the data we got back was widely varying in its robustness. So there's a lot of empty fields. We assigned a letter grade, just like in school, A through F, for all those different criteria that we had before. And so the grade you get is how you measure how well each church does in those criteria. Next. So with that weighted score of the grade with the weight of the criteria, you get a weighted average basically of what the church is. It's heat. So we assign colors to it. The bluer tones are cold, the redder tones are hot. And so here's a picture of what that area looks like, and you can see where the strong churches are and where the weak ones are. From that, we selected 3 courses of action or 3 locations, primarily looking at where are the cold areas where we need our church to go. We also looked at, you can find a cold, like this is a pretty cold area right down here, right? But nobody lives there. So you also need to look at, is there a place that we could have the worship service, like a school or something like that? Do people live there? And is there anything around there which may attract people, like walk-by traffic, so that they see, oh look, there's a church here. Weren't we thinking about starting to go to church? Okay, next. Is everybody good on the picture? Okay. So here's our 3 suggestions to the group. We chose a Belvoir location. This is our #1 choice. It's roughly at the corner of Telegraph and Beulah Road, so it's just outside the north gate of Belvoir. That dirt spot right there is the construction site for the new Wegmans.
Yeah.
There's a couple schools that are right there that provide places that we could start having services.
There's also some really large developments here.
Right, large population area.
Populations.
High density.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
true. And you can see there really isn't a strong church nearby.
You can put your light on again, exactly where you're looking for the pink
That
star.
pink star is, the pink star is the spot. Okay, next. you go down south of the river as you head down 95, you start running into lots of holy people down there. But there is a dead spot right in this area, right in here around Dale City. There's a town center there and a community college that we can have services in. It's not as desirable because, I mean, it's clear to see there's a lot of churches down in that part of the area, but there's not that many strong ones right in here. You really start running into the strong ones when you get down closer to Quantico, and then up here at Woodbridge, but sort of in this dead spot in the middle, not so much. There's less population here. You can see all the lack of development, but there's some potential right in here. Okay, next. And then finally, this spot right here, just east of Wharton. You guys have probably driven that a lot as you try to get to the freeway. Of the three, it's the least desirable. There's 3 other Methodist churches that are very close to there. None of the 3 are very strong, but I mean, you're going to be, you know, potentially killing off your own, I suppose. This area here was actually my best third choice. I like this area here, right here, as you get just west of Newington. A lot of population right here and weak churches. But what we're not showing is this is kind of where our area stopped, where we started looking. You get up here in the West Springfield, it explodes into very strong churches. And we weren't plotting those, but you can see on the map that there's lots of churches there and you're kind of encroaching into that area. So that's questionable. Okay, go to the next. So let's start looking at the people. Like I said, the questions that were up there are probably the most important, but this will at least give you a framework. So the things that are circled are 3 areas of interest. Fort Belvoir was number 1, Dale City to the right was number 2, and Lorton was number 3. It's also interesting, here's us, 22308, right? So it's kind of funny to look at where we live compared to these others. In case you missed the obvious thing there, we're all pretty the same, right?
I'm surprised.
Yeah. Despite the conversation that was going on before of being able to speak in their frequency or project in their frequency, Fort Belvoir really looks a lot like us.
Yeah, it does.
And not only by what you see here with the race, but really, there's a lot of military people, obviously, that live down there. There's a lot of former and active duty military that live in this neighborhood. There's going to be a lot of connection for lots of different reasons between us and Fort Belvoir zip code. Lorton, if you see, look at the purple bar, a surprising number of Asian folks live there, more than any other area, high percentage. Dale City, you're looking at a significant number of African Americans and Hispanic compared to the total population. Certainly more than here, more than Fort Belvoir as well. Next. There's not a way to see that now, is there? Well, you know what it is. You can see the zip code. So
First one is Fort Belvoir.
yeah. So how old people are. Once again, interesting to look at us, our zip code. We are really old in this zip code. Fort Belvoir are really young. That is how we are not connected to them. Most everybody is under 40. Lorton looks a lot more like us in that you have a lot of people that are in their prime earning years, that 40 to 64, but not so much really old. I shouldn't say that. Not so much in the oldest
Wow.
category. Sorry.
I'm in that old category. Man.
Yes, you are.
And then the Dale City area is pretty equal.
Yeah.
Next. I thought that what the households look like would really be an important one, but it's hard to break out anything really telling from any of this. the best that I can do, keep in mind, now this is not percentages, this is total numbers, so we have to try to, you know, when you look at Fort Belvoir, it's the smallest. There's not very many people that live there compared to, say, Dale City. This whole Dale City area is like 10 times the population. So you have to try to, in your mind, do the percentages. What I'm seeing from this is that with red being total households and green being family households, almost all the households have families in them. And so more so than the other two, when you look at Dale City and at Morton, you have a higher percentage of households that are just married couples. They don't have a family.
How much is that reflective of the ability, if you will, of the area in question for there to be home development? I mean, like, if you look at the Fort Belvoir area, you know, so much of the land is already, you know, there's not a high density because there's not, you know, I mean, there's not a lot of places to build. It's sort of like 2308. I mean, we have a lot of single family homes. There's not a lot of development area.
Are you saying why the population is so small?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, because you get out to Dale City, and I mean, you can build anywhere almost.
I only wanted to point that out in that, you know, if you look at this area, you're looking at what, probably, in this zip code of the Belvoir area, there's like 15,000 people, which is more than enough to start a church in if there's no good churches there. That's not to say that, oh, look at all, there's not enough people there to start a church. That's not the point. There's enough people in any of these areas to start a new church. It's just, don't be confused by the height of these bars, that somehow, you know, there's some significance to that. It's the relative height of each of the bars compared to the others in their group. That's the important thing.
So the takeaway here would be in Lord and Dale City, there are many more households that are just couples.
There are not as many family households. There's not as many family households compared to the total number of households. That's the only takeaway I can get from this. And that's because the height of the green bar is almost the same height as the red bar in Belvoir, but not so much in the other two.
Are you pretty confident about the Belvoir numbers because there's been such rapid growth in the last?
It came from last year's census data, or last year's
2010.
2010. The latest census.
That could be significant.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, but also the type of household in the Dale City, Norton area, over half of those are in both of those places. Or it looks like over half of the family households in both of those places have no children. Whereas in the Belvoir area, it's not. More of the households have children.
That's right. Yeah, like I said, almost all of these are what I would consider a traditional family. You've got a wife and kids. This is a lot more, maybe just a couple, or the difference between the green and the red bar is there's lots of people living by themselves. Okay. Yeah.
So this is kind of a snapshot of the census from a little while ago. Is there any kind of forecasting and looking forward of we expect exponential growth in the Belvoir area?
We didn't do that.
Okay. So this is all back focused. Okay.
Right.
But since 2010, the new MGA building is
Mhm.
drawing a lot of employees and potentially new families and households. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
And another thing too is that right outside of Belvoir is a different zip code, right?
That's right. 22315.
Yeah, so that figure counts as well.
Yeah. 22315 is Franconia. I mean, it's literally like right there.
I could say, as someone who just sold his townhouse in 22315 at the seller's market over there, people are snatching up places over there. I mean, so I think there's going to be an influx.
Yeah, and our location is it actually in 22315?
It's right on the border.
Yeah, it's right
It's
in
only in
between.
22315.
Yeah. Okay. So how
educated are the people. Belvoir has a significant percentage of some college or an undergraduate degree. So when you look at the age of the people that were there, and you see the number that have some college but not a degree yet, you can I don't want to use the word guess. You can assess or hypothesize that there's a lot of people that are currently attending college that live there, which would sort of make sense. These are probably younger people, maybe wives of service members that are trying to get a degree. Down in Morton, in 7-9, you got a lot of people that have gone to college, and a sizable percentage that have a further on degree, master's or doctorate, or some type of professional degree. 2-2, down in Dale City, significant people that just have a high school diploma, and an incredibly high percentage that never finished high school. So you look at us, here we are on the far left, everybody's got a college degree, and most of us have something beyond that. Next. Where their kids are enrolled in school, which you can see here. Let's see, what was the takeaway I had from this? For Fort Belvoir, you had, once again, a high percentage of them, of the total, are in college. So you have a lot of adults that appeared that were going to college when you compare it to the last chart, because the last chart was people 25 and over, educational achievement of 25 and over, and here this backs it up by saying a lot of people going to school here that are enrolled in school are going to college, so that's why it's such a high percentage. You look in Morton, you have a fairly high percentage of the total that are going to high school, so remember the Morton people were like in the primary years, so their kids are going to be old right there, and so you can see that because that's where they're going to school, that, and they've got a lot of college age kids. Okay, next. I think this is my last one. Once again, interesting to look at us. We're really skewing the region. But Morton and Belvoir are roughly the same, I guess you'd say, in income. Dale City's just a little bit less, but really not that much less. When you look at this, the only outlier is really aren't. Unless you get all the way down to Quantico, people down at Quantico are making so much. Okay, next, I think that's it. Oh yeah, the example. So this is what we haven't done yet. This is an example of what we're going to do. So we're going to take those 3 areas that we looked at. We should probably roll in the 22315, the Franconi area, since it's right on the border. We'll sort of do a blend. And we're going to, this is the template for how we're going to paint the picture of what those people look like. So this was just an example for 22192, which is down. There's more than just reporting results in this. I liked how this was put together. There's a little bit of analysis in this, like data suggests this area is increasing instability and wealth. Why? Because a very small percentage of the babies born this last year were born to young women. Most of the babies are born to women over 34 years old, which means more stable households. So that's interesting how Patty was able to make that assessment. That's exactly the type of thing we need for statistical data. One more page of that. And then finally, we'll have some conclusion that says, here's what it looks like. What we're not going to try to do is in the example that Jason gave me, who was the church body that put that together? Anyway, the people that did the statistical thing of Fort Belvoir, they made up, here's your typical person. This person is a, what do they call it?
Cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Family or whatever.
Yeah. Power couple. I remember power couple. people who live here are a power couple. They, you know, both husband and wife, no kids, they both work, they enjoy the theater and political discussions and things like that. We're not gonna try to do that. Okay, I think that is my last one. Good.
What questions do you have for Corey and his group? Or what did you learn? What did you get from what you've heard so far?
A lot of work, a lot of good work on that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You
very
guys did
impressive.
very good.
Do you have any preliminary sense of the audience we're looking at, based on this? Sort of a guess, based on what you've done so far?
On which one I would recommend?
Yeah. Other than your favorite.
Oh, I was gonna say, I told Dennis and Jason at the very outset before we even started this, I said, I'm gonna be very biased. I think that this neighborhood's connection with the military folks, the fact that this church is, one of this church's focuses is service both in the community and with mission work, that connects very well with that population outside Fort Belvoir. That's what they do for a living. Provide service, they're used to sacrifice, that will resonate well with them. It will resonate well with them that we look a lot like them, we have the same belief system as they do. That is a good place that I think you'll have a successful start for a church.
So it's
And the
gonna be-
data backs it up.
Right,
But I'm
so it's
not-
gonna be hard not to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's,
And that's what Dennis said was his first drive through there that kind of inspired him to get us here in the first place. All signs kind of pointed towards that from the beginning. Now
You know,
we're
you could
just
make that same-
backing it up with hard data.
you can make the same argument to say, well, you have the same kind of population if you go to Quantico. Right? But they don't have a need down there. There's already a lot being provided to.
And your site has Wegmans.
That's right.
Actually, that's a really.
My wife may make us start going there just
That's
because of the
really
shop.
attractive. Well, packaging stuff.
Well,
you know?
there's a Wegmans not far from the field.
You know, Wegmans.
No Wegmans around here.
Dennis at one time quoted it, Dennis or Jason, quoted that, I think it was in 22308, X percentage of people kind of go to church regularly and therefore X percentage are unchurched. You
Put a
have
beer in
that
there.
information for those zip codes.
You know, after you had said that one night, I went to the website that was on, and I was actually surprised. I don't remember the website. It's on it's in that book that Jason gave me. All of our zip codes have roughly the same percentage. It all hovers somewhere around 16 to 19%.
So you can't use that to discern any difference between them. It's
I was surprised
unequal.
that it was so stable. Matter of fact, it's so consistent, I almost don't believe it. Actually, I don't believe it.
It's, one of the things I noticed in your report is it's gonna be helpful for Aldersgate in discerning its work that it'll do here while the other church is being started to assess what's needed. The data is really helpful. In addition to finding another place, how is it we do ministry here? Because this place is probably different than we think it is. You okay to move on to the next one, or you have any questions for Corey or his group? And so you saw that their recommendation was to take out a room at Wegmans, which I think is a great idea.
Right next to the wine shops.
Right next to the wine shop. That's your issue, I know.
Where's the closest Starbucks?
There's one there in the shopping center.
Three of them in the
That's
same
a
place.
disservice.
Yeah.
I was at a church once and we were talking about, do we need to buy more land or not? I said, you do. And they said, no, we're the size of the average Methodist church. And I said, the largest Lowe's in Virginia is being built across the street. Do you think the people making that decision have any rationale for doing so? Wegmans doesn't waste bricks. But you get on that, right?
Yeah, and Wegmans goes in, they bought the land, they have all the money in the bank to build the building and to staff it before they go into any break grants.
So we have, anyway, so we've got good information, right? is going to help us as we make our decision. So we have worship stuff. So you guys ready to go?
Nope. They're not one.
They're not ready?
The other two.
Mr. Larkin, is your group ready?
Our group is ready.
Great. Tell us what you did and bring us up to speed. Well done. Let's thank Lori and this group. Well done.
Or you're back to follow.
Dennis, if you want to give Steve the clicker. Sorry, Corey, I knew you had your pointer, so.
Did we get it work?
That's big.
Oh. Boy, this is great. This is great. We had a problem while we were organizing here, trying to get our PowerPoints to talk to one another, and I thought, what a great example of how you have to bridge cultures here to communicate. But our job, the resourcing work group's job, is to take the input from the other three groups and construct a budget, construct a timeline, construct a staff requirement, and then in addition to that, take all of this information and feed it in to the staff, feed it into the congregation, and get their reactions back on the work that we've done. We've been tasked with, first of all, let's see.
Back here, back towards Terry.
Okay, point it to the.
Point it to Terry.
Okay, point it to Terry. And hit which? There. Well, that's good.
Hard enough.
That's the best word.
John, you did that.
Okay. All right. Got it. There. Oh, here we are. Okay. First of all, this is our team, and what we've done, as all the rest of you have done, is divide up our tasks by the team members. We have this sort of an assignment. We have to develop a lay leadership model. We have to take a closer look at the budget work that Mike Tidy has already done. We have to get input from the staff. We have to brainstorm on future satellite staff needs, and we have to schedule and conduct congregational working sessions. With respect to the lay leadership, we are still gathering information. We have conducted a benchmarking session with St. Thomas United Methodist Church in Manassas. That was a very, very helpful session. We met with the pastor who was in charge of the satellite church, and at least our initial feeling was that at least the relationship between the two pastors would be the same as the pastors here. They get along very well. They developed a plan that had some issues up front. It wasn't issues between the pastors. It was other issues when this new pastor got there that didn't have anything to do with him that he had to deal with. The real thing to point out, though, in terms of this one exercise of the lay leadership model, is that while you have to have a working group within the satellite, as you might imagine, to deal with all the details associated with the satellite, the bridge between the satellite and the parent church is, first of all, the pastor, and then secondly, a liaison person, a single liaison person representing the lay people in the satellite, speaking to and speaking with the lay leadership in the parent church.
And then the other thing that is particularly important, and boy, this really was driven home. Communication is just absolutely critical. With all the work that we've done here, all the work, the articles that have been written, discussions that have been had, you think you've got it all done. We don't. There are still people out there that really don't understand exactly what it is we're doing. I'm not talking about the work that Corey's already done. I'm talking about just the basic process, the mechanics of doing it. And that's why that's important. And the other thing that Pastor Smith brought out, and I think it goes without saying, it's something that hangs over every one of these meetings, but it's absolutely critical, and that is the power of prayer. And prayer has got to be an integral part of this exercise right from the get-go. We are scheduled to do a benchmarking session with Church of the Resurrection in Washington, middle of next week. And then we have pending benchmarking sessions in the other churches that you see there. With respect to budgeting, we talked a lot about budgeting, staff timeline, and we really felt that there was no way our group was going to be able to construct a budget, a staff timeline in a vacuum. It's just not going to work. So that's why we asked that a week from now, each of the other three groups give us at least a ballpark estimate of the staff that you think you're going to need for your particular area of responsibility. What it's going to cost you to communicate, what it's going to cost you to reach out to the community, what it's going to cost you to worship, and then the timeline. And Dennis, I think when we were talking about timeline before, we were talking in terms of about a 3-year timeline. Was that what you were looking at? Okay. That's not what I asked before, so now it's a 3-year timeline. And if you could, again, the idea is to get something down on paper that we will be able to preview with the key committees in the church on the idea, at least to begin to give people a concrete idea of what it is we're talking about and how we plan to achieve it. We have one initial listening session with the staff, and it's been very general in nature, and it's been positive. But again, the reason why is we really haven't had anything much to tell the staff other than this is we're looking at a given area. There are going to be some staff requirements. There are going to be some budget requirements. Everybody knows that, but you can't even ask a question until you get some definition to what it is you're trying to do and the time frame. Again, our idea would be, Val Thomas is the staff liaison, and what we've said to do, or what we've asked the staff to do, is if you have any questions at all, don't wait for a meeting, or don't wait to email somebody. Email Val or call Val and get your question into the system right away. And then the idea would be that we would have our second meeting with the staff after we have worked through and gotten at least a preliminary idea of the kind of commitment we would be asking people. Just in terms of the future staff needs, the St. Thomas, and again, this is the only benchmarking we've done so far, and this may change once we hear from other churches and how others have attacked this thing. There are two takeaways from the St. Thomas meeting. First of all, there was a worship staff, one worship staff person at 20 hours, and one children's ministry person at 10 hours. But the thing that was really important, at least in my mind, was that what governed that, and this ties in a little bit with what Corey was saying, if you have a family, you're going to want a church that has some sort of a children's ministry, a children's program. And what has happened at St. Thomas is because they had a low level of resource assignment to children's ministry, that was a limiting factor to the growth of the Haymarket Church. We've had 2 congregational listening sessions. Ron Prater did an excellent job. There were 2 sessions between the services on March the 10th, and they were lightly attended. We had a total of about 15 folks. Again, I have thought, and I'm sure it's just because this was something that I was assigned to do, I thought that we'd really gotten the word out to everybody. It had been in the bulletin, it had been announced from the podium, it had been on the website. I really thought that we communicated properly, and you know, perhaps we have, perhaps that in this case, from the standpoint of the people, the broad group bunch in the congregation, maybe what we're really looking at here are kind of 2 broad groups of people. Number one, people who've already got enough information that they need for right now, and the second group is people that are suspending judgment until they actually see a piece of paper and really get a better appreciation for what it is that we're about. Again, one of the things that I know was really very important to Ron, and Ron does this kind of work for a living, and I really take his word for it, is this third point here. The idea that even those people that were present did not understand how we were organized. Not what we were deciding, but just how we were laid out, who was on the committee. Deanna?
I think actually it was from the very beginning, what were the drivers of this? There wasn't an understanding of that. So what was the history and what's the present piece of it? There was just a lack of communication across the whole spectrum there.
But again, small slice, and we are going to follow up with another listening session. Now we still have work to do. This is our last screen here. Benchmarking sessions will be completed. We have the work group budget and staffing needs for a 3-year period that I mentioned a moment ago. The listening sessions, we have another listening session that's scheduled for April 24th. Wednesday at 7 o'clock in room 132. And then with all of that information, we will preview the budget, the staffing and timeline with finance, SPIC, and trustees. And that is it. Are there any questions?
As you look at the staffing needs, are you going to also look at the requirement, what we should expect here in terms of volunteers?
Well, one of the elements that we're supposed to be doing here is a model for lay leaders. And right now, the only thing that we've got as a reference point is St. Thomas. And again, St. Thomas has got a Haymarket group working specifically on Haymarket problems, a lay liaison with the Manassas Church, and then Pastor Smith, who is office in Manassas and commutes to Haymarket.
So Steve, what you're asking, the
different groups to provide for you is an estimate of people and budget that we would need to do what our group was designed to design for this project?
That's right, and the timeline, and it's over a 3-year period. Your group may not have it.
Yeah, that
I was gonna
goes
say,
on.
Well, I mean, we might have rent or whatever that, right? I mean, how many
Yeah.
line items are there on the P and L or whatever you would call the church budget?
It is-
Besides staff,
4 pages.
Utilities.
It's a 4-page budget when you
Yes.
put all the lines out, so
Yeah.
we've
Okay,
got,
so
we've
I
got
bet
lots
there's
of
something
room.
from every table here for the
Right.
budget.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
So what, Steve, they're gonna need from you is a better question.
That's a big.
So they need like the template from,
Yeah.
that you're trying to fill in, so they can
I'd love
find
to
out
see
if
it.
their group has something to contribute, because they don't know
We
yet if they
can,
do.
we can share with you, and we can do it tomorrow. We can share with you the church budget.
We
which
can
will give
post,
you-
I can post the February financials, because we're a month in arrears in the way we process it all. I can post the
Is that
February
too much
financials
information?
onto the website, have them posted onto the website under the worshiping community so that you all can see them.
You mean our church's budget?
Yes,
No, we don't, that's not what I'm
that's not
looking
what
for.
I'm,
No.
sorry.
A template for a
Yeah,
budget?
we need a template for the new church,
Got it.
not our church.
God, I thought Mike
It
did
won't make
that.
any sense to you.
Okay, got
And
it,
so look at what Mike Tatey came up with, and use Mike's as the template
got it.
of all of its categories.
Okay,
Like,
I
for
will-
example, I don't need to know whether we're gonna have a children's coordinator. I need to know at what stage does another full-time staff person get added? What they'll do when they get added needs to be decided by the group that's coming. Not by us, we can't see that, but we know that there are percentages, like when you have X number of people in worship, you need X number of staff people to be able to support what's going on. And you need X number of people that are engaged in lay ministry. And lay ministry is not the liaison. It's how you organize the laity to do the ministry of the church.
Well, that's.
Lay leadership is not about lay leader. It's about kitchen ministry, somebody teaching Sunday school. It's about the laity doing the ministry of the church.
Your altar.
Okay, but again, and we're at a disadvantage here because we have only one data point, and one data point doesn't give you much.
Right.
St. Thomas has, they do not have a physical plant other than what they lease in a school. So they would not have, for example, a kitchen.
But who sets up the altar work? Who sets up the Sunday morning worship space? Sorry,
sets
these
up
are all
the
the things
Those-
that
all right,
start running.
that is the work of the St. Thomas Haymarket
It's the liaison.
Congregation.
group.
Well, we're gonna estimate the lay people that you're gonna need to run a worship service. You're gonna need 4
Right,
ushers,
right.
you're gonna
Okay.
need 2 people that do communion once a month. We're estimating
Okay.
that part. What we're not touching is, how many Sunday school teachers are you gonna need? Any of the other things. We're looking at the worship service only.
And I think Terry's point is valid, especially if the school, who's going to set up, who's going to tear down, that kind of.
So you guys kind of get an idea?
We're including those people in ours, because they're setting up the
That's the
worship
framework of
service.
what would the model look like.
Right.
So
Setting
it's
up,
going to
tearing it
take
down, running it.
20
exactly.
volunteers to get this thing
So
started.
tonight.
Dennis, would it be
For a service.
If Mike has got a doctor's appointment tonight, or else he would be here. Would it be helpful for Mike to develop just a satellite church template that we
Yes.
could put out to everybody? Okay.
There are two levels. One's a financial level, so you get that. How much do you pay in your lease payment?
Okay.
Do you have to rent music equipment? Where are you gonna get him this? Do you gonna use a projector?
Yeah.
All the stuff it takes to get the thing started, what's that upfront cost?
Office.
What's office equipment?
Advertising.
How do you do advertising?
Website development.
What? So, you guys are up to the web.
Bam, here it goes.
So there are all kinds of expenses that you know are coming, and that's what we need from this group here, because that's part of the question that Aldersgate's going to want to ask us is what's this going to cost?
And that's one thing I want to point out. When we talk to the people at St. Thomas, one of the big, what they identified as the biggest mistake that they made was when they went to talk to the congregation about establishing the satellite church, they told them, this is not going to cost you anything.
No.
Now think about that. Now, and absolutely, and that was, and
By the way, I would hasten to add, it was not the guys that are in charge now.
yeah, and he was pulling in punches, and he said that was, let's think about this, visualize, we're doing mission work, and it's not gonna cost us anything, people.
Terrible.
And I guess that was the one takeaway from that I just couldn't shake out of my head.
Not only is it disingenuous, but it leads you to think that being a faithful Christian doesn't cost you anything. Absolutely.
I think the desire was to get to yes. And what I've said to this group is St. Thomas is it's not a good benchmark church, but it's a good place to learn from. Some of the hoops you and I have to jump through is because of mistakes that Haymarket and St. Thomas made. St. Thomas is the anchor church. Haymarket is the planted, the satellite church. And so St. Thomas's senior pastor moved money that had been earmarked by the conference to go to Haymarket and used it to pay the bills of St. Thomas. Not personal bills. He didn't go to the Bahamas. He didn't steal money. But Haymarket couldn't make progress because they didn't have the money. And the reason they didn't have the money is because St. Thomas had used it for their own bills. To which we responded by making him a district superintendent, but that's a whole other thing.
Tell us more.
Okay, here and there?
Dennis, I'm worried that we're creating mini-me United Methodist Church here, and form follows function. And it seems to me before we don't know, for example, is this going to be a more volunteer-driven church than staff-driven church? Is it going to be more staff than there's a lot of things we don't know that we're assuming here that will help us once we craft a vision of what that future looks like, that will then help us to define budget, staffing plan, things like that. And we could rush off and fill in the blanks and create a miniature Aldersgate, or we could be asking ourselves, what will this really look like based upon other information that we get in? I just worry that we may be a little ahead of ourselves by rushing to this, when if we get the other models in, Steve, from the other churches, the other benchmark churches, then we can say, okay, probably in 5 years, this is what it's going to look like down in wherever it is off Belvoir.
I think you're exactly right. What the group creates are what are the questions we have to ask so we can do this.
Right.
But that's what your group's working on.
Yeah.
We all need to identify what assumptions we're making and reaching whatever.
Document assumptions.
And also know.
What it's got and sort of model it, create a model of that.
Also know that part of what we're saying yes to is to creating a Bible study group that will end up having a worship service. But I don't know what more than that it's going to be. So there's an awful lot of development that happens with those people as they start gathering as a church.
Balloons or whatever.
Whatever it does. So we can guess about what that's going to be, but the people on the ground as it starts are going to start, something's going to happen there. The advantage you have is Jason and I are be the people on the ground, and many of you. So we'll be part of it.
So before more options are added, it's all about a single Sunday service. That's what we're trying to pull off.
No.
Build.
We're wrong. What it's about gathering people from, let's say we do Belvoir. So gathering those people into a group like this that will be aiming towards creating a worship service in which they invite people. Where it goes after that, I don't know. The goal is to create a sustainable, worshiping, missional community. But I don't know what it may not take. Most new church starts fail. It's just good for us to know that. and what it will look like. I don't want to have us decide all the details of what the model is going to be without the input of the people who are going to be doing this. I think they need to be part of the conversation.
And one of the pieces to keep in mind when you're doing your 3-year plan is that up front, you don't have to have all of those people. You've still got the staff here at Aldersgate, you've still got the facility at Aldersgate, you've still got the infrastructure of Aldersgate. So if copies need to be made, we can make the copies here. We don't have to pay for them to be made elsewhere. And we can kind of, you build up to it. So you're not gonna necessarily need full-time people there or staffing people because we can help double up on that. Just identifying what those needs are going to be and say, can we use the current staff to do X?
For example, let's say we want to have another associate pastor come on board if Jason and Dennis are going to be spending time in Belleville. What's that other associate cost? Where are we going to put them? What's the office they're going to use? Tier has a desk open next to him. I think we can do that.
Can you answer in your 3-year window, are you anticipating that this congregation will meet in a place that's essentially free, like they're gonna meet in a school? Lots of new church starts are meet in schools because it's free.
It's not free.
No, they're not free.
Relatively speaking, it's free, as opposed to renting commercial space.
There's actually waiting lists at schools oftentimes.
So,
And it's up to the principal on time.
so my question is, within 3 years, do you see it staying at that level, or are you expecting it to, like, we're going to have a lease of commercial space, we're gonna have something a little bit more permanent, which is like ours? You're certainly not thinking we're going to build a structure, we're gonna purchase property and build a structure.
One of the bits of advice that we got from St. Thomas was that where you hold your worship service that is a key thing, and the reason why is because even a space like this, most spaces like this are not necessarily free. I'm talking about being available on Sunday mornings. So, and if you don't get a commitment early on that, it really throws a monkey wrench in whatever other plans you get.
Well, you might have to change your mind and have church another time. So exactly.
Well, and that, even so, you still have to make arrangements for the space, whatever you do. And
part of what you'll be doing, Steve, is finding out what's the cost of that. Okay. What does it cost to rent school space if you're in school or if it's commercial building? One of the biggest mistakes new churches make is they build too soon. And what happens is all of their money goes to pay their mortgage, and the minute you open the doors, the place is full. And then you can't reach anybody else, because all you're talking about is how do we get the bills paid, and it doesn't attract anybody. Often, the rule of thumb now is almost 10 years. You should be in rented space almost 10 years. And sometimes you move from one rented space to another to get the right size. But that is more effective, because if you move into a space too soon, you will always be that size. I started a new church, we met in an elementary school, we got to 250 people a Sunday. When we moved into our building, we doubled in one day. And the minute we moved in, we had 500 people. If you hadn't built a large enough space, you could not have handled it. And it would, the community would have shrunk to the size of the chute. The size of the building would have been the size of the church. So when I told them we're going to build an 800-seat facility, oh, it's great. But it was exactly right.
But just going back to this process question, I mean, I think you can see on the budgeting side that, I mean, you know, Corey presented some suggestions from our group about location, and depending on the decision-making process of which location is selected, I mean, that's going to drive huge differentiation in your cost estimate. So how is that issue to be dealt with?
What we're offering, I think there are 2 levels, and see what you guys think of this, but this is what I think. Right now, I'm trying to answer Aldersgate's questions of feasibility. once I get a yes or a no, whatever they say, and I start now working with that community, it becomes a lot more specific. I end up having to do this again. But now I'm asking better questions and getting better answers.
Well, I think what we have to do now is document our assumption that goes with whatever numbers we come up with.
Right.
So that when we get to step two,
Yeah.
and look back and say, okay, I'm adjusting this because, but if we
Like it might-
my assumption is I'm gonna have 20 people to start with, and then in five weeks, it'll double, or whatever it is, and then you start driving numbers off of that and requirements, but you need to be able to adjust things downstream and know why you're adjusting them, so that.
You're creating limits, kind of boundaries, say this is generally what we think it's going to be.
And it also allows the congregation to make the presentation, say, this is realistic, or you guys are smoking a really good brand of pot, you know, or I don't believe this because, and then you make them come up with the concrete why you don't believe it, as opposed to I don't feel good. And so the assumptions are probably more critical than whatever numbers you come up with.
Okay, well, we'll get, it's just critical that we got Mike's template out.
Yeah, so if you can ask each of the groups specific questions, they'll come up with specific answers.
Okay, all right,
Sound good?
absolutely.
This group's going to be ready in a week, and this group will be ready next week. And so when we come, that's what we're going to hear from. Is there anything that we need to say to each other about what information you need, or anything else you want from Corey's group that you haven't heard yet that you want to know?
I was gonna say, if we want to reference those for next week, can I either get a copy of that, Corey, or can we post that to the website?
Yeah, I think you need to put it out there on the website, because your people are not here.
Email it to me and we'll post it on the.
All right, I'll email it to you tonight.
Yeah, and that might even help with the symphony sessions that we're having, that people are saying that they don't think they have enough information. We can say, well, look, this is some of the studies that we've already done.
You want to see what Corey what we looked at up here? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's,
We have a Google Doc, we can share Google Docs.
What's going to happen in this group whenever a place is chosen? Then where do we go?
elevate awesomeness.
We'll talk. Some of you are on board just for this process, and I'm thrilled to have you. There'll be others who want to be part of what happens in the fall. And you're all will be invited to be part of what happens in the fall. But I know some of you are just on board until we have done this study, and then you'll do something else. But
Genesis Golf.
So we've got a pretty good idea. Anything else you need from Corey's group? Anything else from Steve's group?
I will.
Then we'll break, head home, have a good night. Thank you for being here this evening, and we'll hear from these two groups when we meet next week.
Oh, if you want any plants, feel free to take them off the table.
Thank you, Jerry.
Well, I will.
You have to start answering those questions and just impress it. I need to know this. I need to know in terms of numbers,
What I would like to do is take 160 to be able to take full-time pastors and musicians.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of, yeah.
So kind of benchmarking, say, so the goal is that this sound is self-sustaining at the end of the it's just that's right. I have pastor salaries paid 100% of the conference for the first 18 months. Then 2/3 and so the goal is at the end of that roughly 42 months, you have a self-sustaining. Just to kind of give you an idea.
Close by. I need 3 years.
And it's like when I set our church from 250 to 500, it's not that many new people moved in. There are people who will never ever go to an elementary and the minute you move into a building, they're okay. There are other people who were with us, we were in the building, we were in an elementary for 5 years. And the minute we moved into the building, we had dozens of people stopping. They are pioneers. They like to start up, and once it became like that.
Okay.
Once you seminary in California, used to be a super charismatic seminary. It's now really reputable, kind of mainstream, Pentecostal seminary. And they say on balance for every 150 people you have to work with, you need a full-time staff.
Ask for details later.
We're just begin building.
Steve's going to be
probably, like, most, once you've been about 50 years old, it's roughly between 40 and 50 years old.
They haven't long. These retired people, they don't have everything.
That's right. You have to figure that out. And that is, when you're figuring that group, it's what does the salary of the minister, what's minimum, what's the pension, what's hospitalization, and what's housing. That's right, you know, these are all the expenses that the pastor pays. We're negotiating. Usually the district covers it, but it's just been I've been arguing all day about this topic. Usually inside, so often what happens is conference doesn't do Saturdays. But they do in New Jersey. And so somebody would come to Alder Street to be the new church start pastor at, let's say, so they need counseling,
Michael.
they need hospitalizations, they need pensions, they need salary. The conference and the district take care of that. Because Jason's, he already has housing, so they want to give us the money to go for housing. That's a good thing. So they told me if he moved, they'll come. No. So I said, well, the whole advantage of doing it is that you've got somebody with stability who's known to the end. You don't want. So I said, how about we get another associate? He said, then we'll cover housing. So I said, well, they, anyway, yeah, I have not been able to. We're going to get a package that's worth approximately $250,000. Part of what you have to know as a team is where all that money is designated. What is free for us to spend any way we want? From advertising to staff? No.
It will give us a general idea.
But I want to use specific numbers, I don't want to use $200,000.
Well, yeah, right, but like, let's not have to say, right, but I can understand this, if we analyze, this is what it will cost us. Because what you want to go is,
Yes.
look at.
That is be part of what you guys come up with, why we need this from Alder.
We might be able to.
What Aldersgate should anticipate as their cost for the next 5 years.
But what we're looking at right now is, this is what happens. This is what it-
3 years ago. You told me 3 nights, man, that was fine.